Oh, there. Can you hear me now? Yes.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Thank you. Apologies for the slight delay, some technical problems again. Anyway, before I formally start the meeting, I would confirm that this meeting is being held in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003 and the Licensing Act Hearing Regulations 2005, which allow councils to make their own arrangements for licensing subcommittees to hear matters in connection with premises licence. Oh, please note the reported agenda item number 6 concerning the transfer of premises licence will not be considered following the withdrawal of the application. PC Wall. I will begin by introducing the subcommittee members and officers who will be present throughout the meeting. I'm the chair, Councillor Polly Andrews, and to my left are Councillor Steph Simmons and Councillor Dave Davis. The legal advisor to the committee is Mr. Ben Davis. And clerk to the subcommittee is Mr. Matthew Evans, and the technical support is Joelle Higgins. Other attendees will be introduced at relevant stages at the meeting. Please note the following points with regard to the conduct of this meeting. The Council is video and audio streaming this meeting live on the internet and making a recording. The recording forms part of the public record of the meeting and will be available on the Council's website. Please remember what you do and say in this meeting has a global reach, and your words and actions should be chosen carefully. The chat facility has been switched off to ensure that the attendees' contributions can be offered through the spoken voice and for the public record. Please ensure that all mobile devices are switched to silent. If any remote attendee loses connection, the meeting will be paused to ascertain if the connection can be restored quickly. If it is not possible to recover the connection within a reasonable amount of time, the meeting will continue as long as a quorum of subcommittee members remains able to hear the meetings and be heard. If you plan to leave before the end of the meeting, please can you indicate this in advance. Are there any questions about the procedure before we continue? Are you all happy? Right. Thank you, and then I will now proceed with the formal agenda of the meeting. Are there any apologies for absence? None. No substitutions then? No. Thank you. Any interest to be declared on the agenda today? No. Thank you. We now move to the substantive.
Has his hand raised.
Sorry?
Mr. Blaney has his hand raised.
Have you, Mr. Blaney? What is your interest?
Madam Chairman, no, it wasn't an interest. It was in response to your request that anybody who's leaving before the end of the meeting should declare so. And I'm afraid I must leave once I've given my evidence.
Thank you for letting us know. We will make note of that fact. Right. Application to grant an annual premises licence in respect of How the Light Gets In Festival to 2024-2028, Licensing Act 2003. The purpose is an application for a variation of a premises licence in respect of How the Light Gets In Festival on 2024 to 2028 under the Licensing Act 2003. For attendance, we have in this room, on behalf of the Licensing Authority, Emma Bowell. Public representations from Mr. Blaney, who's the chairman, Cusop Parish Council, Mr. Crispin Elt, a neighbour, also speaking on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Perkins, Miss Dawn Farnsworth, local resident, Professor Brian Henderson, local resident, and Mr. John Ivers, Cusop Parish Council, who I understand is merely attending to give Mr. Blaney support and will not be speaking. Is that correct? Thank you. For the applicant, we have Mr. Ewan McGregor, licensing agent, Hilary Lawson, applicant, Mandy Houghton, applicant, Mr. Jazz Bakar, applicant, and Mr. Calvin Hanks, who's a consultant to the How the Light Gets In. Right, we will start the meeting then with Miss Emma Bowell on behalf of the Licensing Authority.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair rightly said, we're here today to consider an application for a grant of a premise licence in respect of How the Light Gets In Festival under the Licensing Act 2003. The recommendations state that the subcommittee determine the application with a view to promote those licensing objectives in the overall interest of the local community. They should give appropriate weight to the steps that are appropriate to promote those licensing objectives. The representations including supporting information presented by all parties, the guidance issued to local authorities under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003, and the Herefordshire Council Statement of Licensing Policy 2020 to 2025. And the reasons for these recommendations are it ensures compliance with the Licensing Act 2003. There are a number of options open to the subcommittee today. One would be to grant the licence subject to conditions that are consistent with the operating schedule accompanying the application and the mandatory conditions that are set out in the Licensing Act 2003. Grant the licence subject to modified conditions to that of the operating schedule. To exclude from the scope of the licence any of the licensable activities to which the application relates to. To refuse to specify a person on the licence as the premises supervisor, or to refuse the application. The application for grant of a licence has received relevant representations and is therefore brought before the subcommittee for determination. Herefordshire Council Statement of Licensing Policy 2020 to 2025 states that all representation must be relevant in that the representation relates to one or more of the licensing objectives. For example, they must be about the likely effect of the grant of the application, and this follows paragraph 8.13 in the Section 182 guidance, which uses the same wording. Paragraph 8.13 is contained in this report at number 4. The details of the application are as follows. The applicant is TVF Limited. The agent is TLT Solicitors. The grant of the application was received on the 8th of March 24, and the date the consultation ended was the 4th of April 24. The application can be found at Appendix 1 and requests the grant of a licence to allow the following. A time-limited premises licence of 5 years from 2024 to 2028, which was one event per year over 4 days. Films, live music, plays, recorded music, performance of dance and anything similar to those, indoors and outdoors, Friday 1 p.m. until 1 a.m, Saturday and Sunday 9 a.m. until 1 a.m, and Monday 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. Late night refreshment, indoors and outdoors, Friday to Sunday 11 p.m. until 1 a.m, and sale and supply of alcohol consumption on and off the premises, Friday from 1 p.m. until 1:45 in the morning, Saturday and Sunday 11 a.m. till 1:45 in the morning, and Monday 11 a.m. until 4:45 in the afternoon. Just to mention to the committee members and those who are attending today, light night refreshment is only applicable Monday to Sunday between the hours of 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. So summary of representations are as follows. One representation offering conditions was received from the Environmental Protection, who act as a responsible authority, and the conditions were agreed with the applicant, and that can be found at Appendix 2. 9 relevant representations have been received from members of the public that the licensing authority have accepted as being relevant, and can be found at Appendix 3. In summary only, the relevant representations broadly relate to the following: prevention of public nuisance, noise from the site, particularly amplified music, prevention of crime and disorder for disorderly conduct, and public safety, management and supervision of the campsite. A number of the relevant public representations contained information that was not relevant. Example, increased traffic, management and supervision of the campsite. These cannot be considered in determining the application in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003. 2 letters of support were received from members of the public during the consultation period and can be found at Appendix 3. Bit of background history is in 2018, the festival was run on temporary event notices. In 2019 and 2020, the festival was licensed under an occasional premise licence, although due to the COVID pandemic, the 2020 festival was cancelled. The application in 2019 received public representation and was therefore brought before the licensing subcommittee, where the decision was made to grant the licence subject to inclusion of added conditions in relation to prevention of public nuisance and protection of children from harm. The application in 2020 received an objection from a responsible authority, but the hearing was cancelled due to the applicant agreeing the proposed conditions under the 4 licensing objectives. The application in 2022 received 1 representation from a responsible authority, which was West Mercia Police, and the conditions were agreed by the applicant. 5 relevant representations were received from members of the public in line with the licensing objective prevention of public nuisance, and the subcommittee's decision was to grant the licence as applied for. The application in 23 received no representations from any of the responsible authorities. 4 representations from members of the public in line with the licensing objective prevention of public nuisance. 7 letters of support were received from members of the public during that consultation period, mainly stating that they have not experienced any noise nuisance in the past. The subcommittee's decision was to approve the application as applied for. Any decision may have an impact on the local community, and this report is in relation to a premises licence under the Licensing Act 2003, and as such there are minimal environmental impacts for the council. There's equality duties and legal implications found in this report that your legal advisor can advise on further if needed. And this report is in relation to a premise licence under the Licensing Act 2003, and as such there are minimal resource implications, and there are likely to be any financial implications for the council at this time. Excuse me. There is a right of appeal to the Magistrates' Court, which states that It's okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. Sorry about that. There is a right of appeal to Magistrates' Court within 21 days of the decision being served on the applicant and all relevant parties. There is little risk associated with a decision at this time, as the legislation allows a right of appeal to Magistrates' Court within a period of 21 days of the decision being made in writing. All responsible authorities and members of the public living within Herefordshire have been consulted. Appendices 1 to 4 can be found at the back of this report, and there have been a number of supplements have been served on the committee and all parties attending today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Emma. Sorry? Mr. McGregor, did you want to say something?
Yes, sorry. I'm sorry to jump in at this stage. I just wanted to check. I can see some of the representors on screen. So I have Mr. Henderson, Mr. Evers, Mr. Blarney, and I think Dawn Farnsworth, although I can't see her on the screen. Did I hear you say, Councillor, that you have some other representors in the room with you?
We have PC Wall, but pardon?
Sorry, Councillor Andrews, PC Wall is here just to observe the meeting.
He's here as an observer. He's not.
As he hasn't made representation, he's here just to address any questions the committee members may have in regards to any disorder.
That's all.
Oh, right, sorry, I do apologise. I thought you said that there was some other
No,
parties in the
not
room
at
with you.
all.
That's fine. I do apologise. I'll go back on mute now.
Thank you. Right, we will start. Mr. Blaney, who is the chairman of Cusop Parish Council.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. I don't intend to repeat what is written in the representation submitted by Cusop Parish Council, as the committee has, I'm sure, taken the time to study it. The committee has also received a letter from the Parish Council in addition, which addresses some issues that cannot be covered within the context of the representation form, and I trust that the committee has read this carefully as well. Extracts of 2 Parish Council meetings with regard to discussion about the festival are also submitted for their attention. In essence, the view of the Parish Council is not averse to the festival taking place. The Parish Council should reflect the views of all parishioners, and many do enjoy the event, although those living at the other end of the parish would not be aware of the impact it has more locally. I note that despite our 2 publicised meetings attracting a number of residents who had concerns with the festival, it attracted nobody to speak in favour. I presume the letters of support in the bundle were sought out. It does provide an entertaining event, and I understand that it raises some £1.2 million, as the committee was told last year in this. I presume that the figure relates to the turnover of the festival, not what it brings to the area. The parish sees not a penny from the festival, though the Parish Council notes the figure with some interest. It suggests that the festival generates sufficient funds perhaps to invest a bit more in adequate stewarding and management. The suggestion that it runs at a loss is curious. The decision to run an event that loses money is a business decision taken by the applicant and has no bearing whatsoever on the licensing requirements. This festival occupies Parish Council time year after year with the same issues being raised. They are all to do with poor levels of execution of the conditions of the licence. I've looked back over previous years and I've inspected representation forms. They all refer to the same issues, so the committee can be in no doubt that the festival has caused local upset year after year, and it should take this into regard. The parish council is of the view that the festival could be conducted in a manner which causes less nuisance to the locals. I hope it is obvious to the committee that the parish council has adopted a constructive approach to this problem. I note that this licence application is being made relatively close to the event. There is already a very nicely presented brochure available throughout the area showing the whole programme and all the participating speakers, bands and other acts. There's a very professional website likewise. It would be nothing short of disastrous if the licence were not issued, but I trust that the committee does not feel under any pressure in this regard. If the festival can do all the other organising so far in advance, then they could have applied for their licence similarly. The only issue with the festival site itself is the noise, which records suggest continues to exceed permitted limits. Since an improvement in noise has been noted, this shows what the locals have had to put up with in earlier years. Outside of the site, and all as a direct consequence of there being a festival, and all under the direct control of the organisers, is where a lot of the problems arise. With poor organisation and management of the festival goers, many of whom have supped well. The committee cannot ignore the fact that this kind of festival, as opposed to the concurrent Hay Literary Festival, is associated with quite a lot of intoxication with various substances. And I don't raise this point out of disapproval, but simply because it is a factor that should play into the manner in which it is managed by the organisers. I note that the licensing process provides a window for negotiation to try to resolve issues and obviate the need for a hearing. And I also note that no negotiation has been offered. One point of considerable local concern, indeed alarm, is that the application is for a 5-year licence. At the very least, the committee must have formed the view that this event, which has been staged annually for several years at this site, is still the cause of controversy. It does not, therefore, have a settled relationship with the local community, and the committee may well consider that it therefore requires annual scrutiny of its conduct. To issue a 5-year licence would remove that scrutiny, or at least make it more difficult and present the presumption of permission. The parish council is very much of the view that a 5-year licence would not be in the public interest. Another point which the committee would wish to take into account is a forthcoming change in the law with regard to temporary campsites. This year, the campsite is exempt from planning as it falls under permitted development. After the 25th of July of this year, new regulations come into force, such that festival campsites are no longer classed as permitted development. The committee would wish to satisfy itself with regard to the ramifications of this change in relation to this licence, and in particular the ramifications of a 5-year licence, and they may wish to seek the advice of their legal assessor on this point. So in conclusion, Madam Chairman, I refer the committee to the end of the letter already submitted from the Parish Council, which states that the Parish Council requests that the licensing authority takes and considers evidence upon the manner in which the festival is organised and managed and the issues that have arisen, sets licensing conditions that are fair to all parties, and I would ask the committee to take particular note of this point, and considers whether a 5-year licence is appropriate. And that, Madam Chairman, concludes my evidence, and I thank the committee for its attention.
Thank you, Mr. Blaney. Very clear. We now ask Mr. Crispin Elt.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, councillors. Firstly, I would like to say that I'm not against the festival in principle, but past experience has been negative due to poor management and control, which have caused a lot of noise disturbance and nuisance to myself and many of my neighbours. We live in Booker's Edge, which is a residential development of 25 houses in a private road almost opposite the entrance to the festival site. My neighbours Mr and Mrs Perkins have made a representation and have nominated me to represent them today because they are not able to attend. Some of my other neighbours are elderly and do not feel confident to use online technology to raise their concerns or jump through the hoops of the representation process to make their voices heard. Hence, I'm the only speaker representing many of the Booker's Edge residents today. The main issues have been with noise nuisance from both the festival site and the adjacent campsite. Booker's Edge is normally a very quiet place. During the festival, we are invaded by hordes of people with a large campsite in the fields to one side of our development. We find it quite intimidating and don't feel very safe.
To interrupt you
Last
there,
year,
just to
the
say
noise
the
management-
campsite is not part of this, not part of the licensing committee's responsibility.
Okay, I will not refer to that any further. Last year, the noise management of the event was considerably better than in previous years, and we were encouraged by that. We hope that this will continue and that noise limits will be strictly adhered to. We note from the supplementary information that the organisers have made changes to the site layout and hope that this will result in a reduction of noise nuisance this year. Even with the proposed noise limits, the festival still causes a lot of nuisance and disturbance, and an earlier finish to events would help to avoid this. Say an 11 p.m. finish to events and the site cleared by midnight. On the Powys side of the river, the noise monitoring point is about 500 metres from the festival site, up a hill. And we would question the logic of this when there are occupied properties closer to the festival site on that side of the river. We have public safety concerns about pedestrians on the narrow pavement on Newport Street, with the increased traffic due to the festival. It also impacts us in Booker's Edge. With the previous events, we've received no help or support from the council or festival organisers to prevent a stream of vehicles entering our small private road to look for parking space and turning around when they realise it is a cul-de-sac. There is a public safety issue with the parking of vehicles in this narrow road because it could cause obstructed access for emergency vehicles. We have elderly and sick people living in Booker's Edge. We have had at least 6 blue light ambulance visits to our road in the last few years. I note from the supplementary information that the organisers have planned to put traffic cones in Booker's Edge this year. I can only hope that this is carried out and that it works to deter parking. I also have some crime and disorder concerns. We walk our dogs on a public footpath which crosses the top of one of the camping fields. We have twice encountered people from the campsite in a very spaced out state with very wide eyes lying on the bank at the top of the field, seemingly unable to pass the time of day with us. We wonder whether this is due to drugs or alcohol or both. It was certainly a bit worrying, and I wouldn't want to take children past people in this kind of state. We note this year that the organisers have applied for a 5-year licence. We would seriously question that this is appropriate given the previous issues with the management and the control of the festival. This surely deserves to be reviewed at a public forum annually until the festival is proven to be causing less noise, disturbance and intrusion to those who live nearby. At this stage, we think a licence for 1 year is more appropriate. In summary, we're asking for a 1-year licence, a reduction in the licensed hours, and for the festival to operate within its agreed plans and show more consideration to its neighbours with regard to noise, disturbance and invasion of our little road at Booker's Edge. We thank the licensing committee for letting our concerns be heard. We hope you will consider these in reaching your decision, and hope that we will not find it necessary to voice our concerns in future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. L. I would just comment that I'm afraid, once again, parking and roads are not part of our remit. We are the licensing committee. And also, I would also like to say that the behaviour of people outside the site, again, is not whether you think they've taken drugs or not, is again outside our powers as a licensing committee. Mr. McGregor.
And I do apologise for jumping in again. As I understand it, Mr. Alt is speaking on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Perkins, whose representation appears, I think, at pages 68 and 69 of the report. And Mr. Alt, you, Chair, have mentioned the point about crime and disorder. Representors, and I have no issue with this at all, are allowed to develop the points that they have raised in their representation, but they're not allowed to stray beyond the points that into other licensing objectives that they haven't raised in their representation. And Mr. and Mrs. Perkins have not raised the issue of crime and disorder within their representation. I just wanted to make that point clear.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, please may I respond on that?
Well,
in my own representation, I did make reference to crime and disorder.
thank you. Right, we'll go on to the next person. Miss Dawn Farnsworth, you're a local resident.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. Can you hear me? Firstly, I would like to thank the committee for this opportunity to voice my concerns and for taking my points into consideration. It is my understanding that everybody would be in favour of granting this application with amendments. Objections have only been raised in order to eradicate the noise, disturbance and nuisance issues that are raised annually. How the Light gets in go to great lengths to state they wish to work with the community, and yet we suffer year after year with the same problems arising. Given the amount of time and money spent on these by yourselves, Herefordshire Environmental Health, Powys Environmental Health, and all the other very necessary departments, this must be a huge drain on resources. The rented area on which the event is currently sited has changed dramatically over the past couple of years, and is set to do so again with planning for a further residential area in the pipeline. So although this may have been the perfect location for a festival to 1 AM in previous years, going forward this needs to be addressed, and pulling the finish time to 11 PM would solve the majority of issues we suffer on an annual basis. Last year's licence application hearing suggested that I get Powys Environmental Health to set up a noise monitoring station on my land. After much wrangling, this was achieved, and I have submitted those findings to yourselves and Hereford Environmental Health, although no action was taken. The email from Laura Lewis, Powys Environmental Health, clearly states that the noise between 12 and 1 AM was between 56 and 58 decibels, exceeding the limit set of 45 decibels every night of the event, thus breaching the conditions of the licence for 2023. And providing firm evidence I have a noise issue on my land. The law states that noise after 11 PM should be 34 decibels, so I would ask how the figure of 45 was initially achieved and agreed for previous festivals. The post-event report from Calvin Hanks regarding the noise monitoring, which I believe was submitted to the licensing committee after last year's event, shows noise levels were measured on 17 occasions after 11 PM across 3 nights. Venues had to be turned down a total of 15 times out of the 17, with only 2 readings being below the permitted levels, thus again providing evidence that the conditions were breached every night, and bearing in mind this was an improvement on the year before. The current noise monitoring stations have been agreed with Environmental Health for previous years, and both parties tell me it's the other's responsibility for positioning. Can I therefore ask you to restore my faith in this process and, as a condition to the licence, amend the noise monitoring point at Boatside Farm to be set on my property, as I am the nearest neighbour and I have proved, as requested by yourselves, there is a noise issue. The NMP states that if additional monitoring points are requested, they can amend the plan to account for those. So I'm asking again for a noise monitoring station put on my land. The comprehensive and very professional brochure shows start times for all acts, but no expected finishing times. The website states event number 40, 133 and 227 finish at 1:30 a.m. Surely this is breaching a license which hasn't actually been granted yet. And acts 41, 42, 134 and 228 finish at 1 a.m. and 135 and 229 finish at 12:45. By the time the site and surrounding area are cleared, that's a lot of noise, nuisance and disturbance going on into the small hours of the morning. Finishing at 11 p.m. would eradicate the issues around the site and hopefully the campsite for the whole event. To cover the point of lost sales and feasibility of the event, it could be argued that it is now and never has been financially viable. By their own admission, it has never made profit. What if the music and performance were to start earlier in the day? They could easily achieve a finish time of 11 p.m. Currently, the advertised start times are 4:15 p.m., 6:30 p.m. on Saturday and 6 p.m. on Sunday, giving plenty of room for rescheduling with no loss of events, no loss in ethos or ticket sales. This application was discussed at a recent Chamber of Commerce meeting of which I am a member, and it was decided that closing earlier would not be detrimental to the town. If anything, the reverse would probably be the case, as it would limit the sale and consumption of alcohol, thus reducing noise, nuisance and disturbance levels. The inference that closing at 11 p.m. would cause a clash between their own and Hay Festival goers was laughed at, and it was felt that going past 11 p.m. only gave people from both festivals and locals alike more time in which to drink and cause nuisance. Last year's festival had issues with rowdy and drunken behaviour from our own local football team, who'd gone in after 11 p.m. They were escorted back off the premises, but gained access again only to continue their merriment. Security seemed unable to keep unwanted and unruly revellers out, as we witnessed people gaining access over the fence alongside the river. As a member of the licensing committee astutely pointed out last year, it's all well and good having an expertly written plan, but it's the execution of the plan which is the most important thing, and sadly this is where it falls down. We can only assume, going on past experience, the same thing will happen again this year and going forward. So I urge you to put a finish time of 11 p.m. on the event, and let's see if that helps. In the conclusion from Mr. Ewan McGregor, he states the question is simple, and it reads, is this application likely to undermine licensing objectives? He then quotes national guidance, which leads to the need for evidence. Well, I believe you have the evidence before you, and by way of other objectors here today, that the licensing application in its current form will undermine 3 out of the 4 licensing objectives. But can I just reiterate, nobody wants the licensing application refused. We just need it amended so that the festival fits now within its current site and surroundings. I've already mentioned possible further residential planning for the area. That, with the campsite regulations changing this year, I don't think the licensing committee can grant a 5-year license for this event. At its current rented location, there have been a total of 4 festivals, and complaints have been raised for each year. If we look back over the last 5 years, lives and situations have changed immeasurably, and who is to say what lies ahead? Surely agreeing to 5 years would not be in the public interest. My land, approximately 60 metres across the river, is designated SSSI and is currently being written up as a local wildlife site. In August of this year, an extensive bat survey will be undertaken to determine roost sites for endangered bats, which is why disturbance from excessive lighting, pyrotechnics and lasers are another important issue I want you to consider. The law states you must consult Natural England if a proposal might affect the site of a SSSI. It needs an environmental impact assessment under the Habitats regulations. Both banks of the River Wye are designated SSSI for its entire length, and consent must be given by Natural England for a whole raft of operations, including erection of permanent or temporary structures and recreational or other activities likely to damage features of interest. No environmental impact assessment.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but those things you've just mentioned are planning issues, not relevant to the licensing committee.
Sorry, I was a bit long-winded. Just to point out that there's a point of nuisance and disturbance to the wildlife as well, in that there was a wildlife crime. I was just picking up the point of nuisance and disturbance. Sorry, I didn't appreciate it. It couldn't be applied to animals. My concerns, I'll move on. My concerns due to the late nature of the application, very early publication of the brochure and the booking and advertising of many acts, is that this is already a fait accompli and the festival believe they will be granted this application in its current format without resolving the recurring issues of previous years. I ask you not to be swayed by this. And so to sum up, and for the reasons stated, I'm asking for your help in finding a solution to this repeated problem with a finish time of 11 p.m. and an annual licensing application so the situation can be monitored more closely following and for each festival going forward. Thank you, Madam Chairman and committee, for your time today.
Thank you. I think our next speaker will be Professor Henderson, who is a local resident.
Madam Chairman, thank you. As a doctor of philosophy, I clearly would like this festival to go on. And like everyone else has said, our only objection is the lateness of the licensing. I live about 200 yards from the festival and about half that from the campsite. I normally go to bed, I'm a 75-year-old man with a 76-year-old wife, normally go to bed around 11 to 12. The noise from the festival carries on, and then at about 1 o'clock, the festival noise increases because everyone starts coming out. So really, I cannot get to sleep until about 3 o'clock in the morning, and the noise from the festival and from the campsite really can be quite tremendous. So that really is public nuisance. Crime and disorder, all you've got to do is walk down, as I have to do because I've got to walk a dog latish at night, and also, you know, the local shopping is done at the co-op, which is right beside the festival site. You walk down there almost any time, but particularly late at night, as I have to do with the dog, and there are a lot of very inebriated people, a lot of very strange people, and it really does frighten me. So, you know, I don't know what the crime and disorder statistics are for the festival, but I'd be interested to see them. And again, this relates to public safety. There's a lot of, particularly in the morning, again, when I'm walking the dog, there's a lot of broken glass, broken bottles lying around in Newport Street. So in all in all, I find that 3 or 4 days, and it's not just 3 or 4 days because the site is set up and then it's taken down. So there's about, you know, 5 or 6 days of quite marked disorder. And finally, I like to sort of concur with my fellow guest here, that it's not sensible to give a 5-year license, because that means that the yearly feedback from locals to the festival organisers, which should be part of the management of the festival, is missing. And as Nick Blaney has said, there are changes in licensing arrangements applying to festival campsites. So I shall leave it at that. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor. We will now move on to Mr. Ewan, who is the licensing agent.
Sorry, we're still in the morning. Good morning, committee. I just wanted to pick up a couple of points, and I've made this already, but it is important that when members of the public speak to the committee, that they are allowed to amplify the points they've made in their representation, but they're not allowed to stray beyond the representation that they made. And that was certainly the case, I think, from Dawn Farnsworth when we were talking about crime and disorder, and Mr. Elt. I haven't seen Mr. Elt's representation, but I'm presuming, and if I'm wrong about this, if somebody could correct me, that his representation is the redacted one that appears, I think, at supplementary bundle 2 to the application. I have Mr. Lawson, Mr. Bakar, Mandy Houghton, and Mr. Hanks on the call with me. I'm going to be about 10 minutes in addressing you. I know that Mr. Lawson would like to say a few words, and then at the end of that, I'm just going to summarize our points. I've provided you with some outline submissions at pages 195 to 201 of the first supplementary bundle, and I know that you as a committee will have read all of the papers, so I'm not going to read those out. I'm going to try and summarize the key points and pick up some of the points that have been made by those who have spoken already. The application is for a 5-year license, and my clients, having secured the site for 5 years, felt that it would be appropriate to apply for a 5-year license. It's one 4-day festival, 3 nights, 4 days, over the course of those 5 years. And concern has been raised in a number of the representations about the granting of 5-year license with no recourse, or not being able to hold my clients to account, or that there would be no public scrutiny. And I'm afraid that that is simply not correct. Can I just set some context to that? It is common for festivals to apply for and be granted licenses for at least 5 years, and sometimes even longer. And during the course of those 5 years, festivals might also apply to increase the hours or the capacity over the time period. But we are not seeking that here. The hours are to remain the same. The capacity is to remain static over the course of the years. It will be subject to public scrutiny every year. There will be a safety advisory group debrief. There will be amendments made to the safety management plan, the noise management plan, as we have done this year. We will attend debriefs with the residents as required, and members of the local authority will be no doubt involved and have an interest in that. And the committee can take comfort and confidence from the fact that the previous operation of the festival has not been the subject of any regulatory enforcement action, let alone a review. And in the last 2 years, there have been no objections to the application from any of the responsible authorities. And that, in our view, is telling. Where there is non-compliance or there is non-cooperation and there is evidence to support it, then there is the opportunity to review the license. But to say that there is no public scrutiny over the course of the 5 years, I'm afraid, is simply not correct. The license is conditioned as to when we would notify the council the dates of the festival. We did that this year in October. There is a significant event safety management plan that appears at page 98 of the supplementary bundle, and the noise management plan is at page 150. Those are living documents. We had a very helpful Safety Advisory Group committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, and the plans have been further adapted as a consequence of that. Can I just deal very quickly with your licensing policy? The licensing policy recognises that entertainment business sector and community licence festival facilities in Herefordshire contribute to the local economy and social infrastructure. There is a economic impact assessment, and Mr. Bakar is on the call if you wish to discuss that with him. There is direct and indirect induced economic benefit to the local community in the order of £2.7 million, and direct and indirect employment for 43 people. And the festival is very much in line with the stated aims of the council's own licensing policy, which is to encourage licensees to provide a wide range of entertainment facilities throughout their opening hours, promote live music, dance, theatre, etc., for the wider cultural benefit. They are a factor in supporting an economy which builds on the county's strengths and resources, which is one of Herefordshire's aims. The policy also recognises the importance of working together, and that is something that my clients have done. It's perhaps unfortunate that they weren't invited to the Chamber of Commerce meeting, but maybe in future years they will. There were significant post-event safety advisory group debriefs. The plans for this year have been modified as appropriate. There was pre-application consultation with the residents, businesses, the local parish council, and all of those things will continue. So this application is very much in line with your council's own licensing policy. There were 3 safety advisory group debriefs and copies of those minutes, copies of those agreed minutes are in the bundle at pages 22 to 32. That's the supplementary bundle. The feedback from those meetings was overwhelmingly positive. I'm not going to read out all of it, but some key points: traffic, policing and public health all confirmed that they had no issues with the operation of the festival. Jacqueline Amani, a former environmental health officer of the authority, said there was no adverse response from QSOP Parish Council, an overall improvement on previous years, which is very positive. And Elizabeth Lochland, another environmental health officer from the authority, visited the festival, and she commented, no issues reported with the complaints hotline. And those members who sit on the committee today will remember that last year we introduced a complaints hotline, the details of which were circulated to the whole of the local community. The evening was not overly populated. Steps taken by How the Light Get In appear to have improved relationships with the local community, which is very positive. And the fire officer has made a number of observations, all of which have been incorporated into this year's fire risk assessment. After those SAG debrief meetings, there was further pre-application with the licensing authority, and that again is contained in the bundle of documents that we have provided. We provided a copy of the operating schedule, the dates of when the festival is going to take place, and it is telling that none of the responsible authorities questioned or sought to amend the days, the hours, the licensable activities. They didn't seek to amend, adapt, or request any additional conditions, and nor, most importantly, did they request any change to my client's request for a 5-year license. And the truth is that in the course of the whole process, only one request to add one condition from the environmental health officer was made, and it was agreed as quickly as it was offered, and his representation was subsequently withdrawn. Mandy Houghton, who is on this call, engaged with the local community. She attended a meeting of QSOP Parish Council on the 13th of March, and the primary concern, and you get that from the representation that is made by the council, the parish council, related to the campsite. Now, your officer has already read, and Madam Chair, you've already identified that the campsite and increased traffic management and supervision of the campsite and increased traffic are matters that sit out with your purview, and that is at paragraph 10 of your report on page 13. Notwithstanding that, my clients continue to work with the highways team, and the management plan for the campsite has been improved and enhanced. There is going to be increased staffing, increased management levels. Cars will no longer be permitted to park next to tents, and the complaints hotline telephone will transfer to the campsite when entertainment ceases on the main site. A residents' engagement letter was sent to 100 households and businesses on the 10th of February. And as we did last year, a further residents' engagement letter will be sent to those local residents again in advance of the festival taking place. So far, and I do apologise, I'm rattling through this because I appreciate that time is precious and we have supplied you with a lot of documentation. At the heart of the operating schedule is the event safety management plan. The Council's Safety Advisory Group has oversight and scrutiny of these plans. The most recent meeting was on the 18th of April, and a further update was circulated 2 days ago, and a final visit will be carried out by the Safety Advisory Group on the morning the festival starts. The ESMP, the Event Safety Management Plan, the author is Calvin Hanks. He has worked on this site for 8 years. Is on any assessment a significant and substantial document? As I've said already, all supporting documents are living documents. There is ongoing scrutiny up to, during, and indeed post the event. So far as the representations are concerned, you have a number of letters from the local community, many in support of the festival, and there are some adverse representations, and you've heard from some of the local community today. I'm not going to deal with the totality of those because I'm conscious of time, but pages 12 to 17 of the supplementary report in the statement of Mandy Houghton, she deals with these in some significant detail. But at paragraph 9 of the committee report, and that appears at page 13 of your committee report, you have dealt, your officers have highlighted 3 issues, and the first is noise. In 2023, the noise complaint hotline was set up. It was a suggestion that was made by the environmental health officer. It was something that my clients were more than happy to do, and they fully embraced. And the totality of calls to that hotline during the course of the 4-day event were 5 phone calls. 3 were about noise levels. When the calls were received, Mr. Hanks or his colleagues went to check the sound levels and they were within agreed parameters. 1 was about the campsite. That falls outside the purview of this process, but as I've said, there will be the complaints hotline contact number will now be transferred to the campsite after the end of activities on the festival site. And there was 1 further text. Mr. Hanks called them back and there was no response. There was also 1 call to the environmental health officer and the officer checked the sound levels at that time and there was not an issue. Now, as a consequence of all of the feedback that we have had, a number of changes have been made. The speakers have been repositioned. There's been a repositioning of venues on site, and there will be more stewards to assist with reducing noise levels of those leaving the site. And that is dealt with at page 10 of the supplementary bundle and in more detail. Insofar as the positioning of noise monitoring points, that's a matter for the Safety Advisory Group, and those monitoring points have been agreed with your environmental health officers through the process that is adopted by the Safety Advisory Group. Insofar as crime and disorder is concerned, you, Chair, have already made a comment or an observation, a correct observation about when people leave the site. But can I just make 3 points about crime and disorder? There is no police representation to this application. And in all the time that I have been involved with this application or this festival, there has never been a police representation to this application. There is no history of this festival being associated with crime and disorder, and my clients will correct me if I'm wrong, but they have never had to call the police. The campsite, you've heard, falls outside of the license, and there are additional measures that will be put in place there. There are some ancillary issues. 1 relates to litter on the streets, and my clients have committed to carrying out litter picks on the street. And there is also an ongoing concern about the use of lasers at the site, and it's the same representation that was made last year about lasers. Lasers haven't been used at this site for over 3 years, or for 3 years. As a balance to the representations that have been made, there are 15 letters in support, 2 as formal representations, and they appear at pages 91 and 92 of the main bundle. And there are 13 letters. I'm not going to read those out, but those are all from people who live locally. They are some of the closest residents to the festival. They live on Booker's Edge, Newport Street and Millbank, and they have said that they experience no issues of noise nuisance crime and disorder associated with this festival. They have taken time to write in and support the application, and I would encourage you to read those letters. I have a few comments to make just in summary at the end, but I know that Mr. Lawson would like to speak, so I'm going to give the floor over to Mr. Lawson, and then once he has spoken, I will just summarise where we have got to with this application. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, can I just interrupt?
Indeed, Emma.
Sorry. So in 2002, West Mercia Police did put in a representation as they were concerned about the conditions being offered, but those conditions were agreed.
Thank you. Did you hear that, Mr. Yes. Only comment, very, I've read all this, a very complete plan, but plans are plans, and as was said last year, it's how they're enforced that matters. Are you going to hand over to Mr. Lawson now, are you?
Yes, I am, and I would just say on that, Councillor, is that you're absolutely right about a plan as a plan, and it's how it's enforced. But what I would encourage you to look at and read are the comments made by all of the officers in the SAG debrief, a meeting that we requested. We had to have 3 separate meetings for a variety of reasons. But the overwhelming response from the Safety Advisory Group was that the event had gone well, that it was positive, and that the measures insofar as noise is concerned had been a positive step forward.
Simply say that the number of complaints about noise does seem to have increased. Mr. Lawson, I think now you're going to say a few words.
Can I just very quickly, Councillor, just address that? Insofar as the noise complaints that were made through the noise complaints hotline and specifically set up and dedicated for concerns from local residents about that, is that 3 calls were made over the course of a 4-day festival to the noise complaints hotline, and when the noise levels were checked, they were within the agreed parameters under the noise management plan, and which had been agreed with your environmental health officer, and that one of the calls to was in relation to the campsite. There was a further call to your environmental health officer who checked the sound levels and confirmed that actually the sound levels were not an issue. So whilst the number of complaints may have increased, you've got to look behind that and find out whether or not they are substantiated. But I'm going to leave the floor now to Mr. Lawson.
Mr. Lawson, would you like to, if your system is now working, I hope?
I hope so. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, can hear you.
Yeah. So I really just wanted to say an overall way. I've been a resident in Hay for 27 years. I came to Hay in 1997. I founded the Globe Arts Centre 16 years ago to encourage cultural events in the town, and the festival followed shortly afterwards. It is, as a point that we make in the submission, the Arts Centre and the festival have always been in deficit, and they are supported by donations from a number of people, including myself. The only reason for doing it is to improve the cultural life of the residents, and therefore we are, of course, very concerned to ensure that the residents benefit from the event. That's all we are trying to do. That's all we are trying to do. I would also like to note, I also think it's worth noting that the objectors you've heard from today are the same people in previous years who have objected. And despite our attempts to improve the circumstance of the festival and ensure there is no disturbance and no problem, which your own environmental health officer has come to the view that there hasn't been, the same objections are made with the same vehemence. I don't understand why this is. or what the motivation is for doing it. But all I can say is we do everything we can, not only to devise the plan, but to ensure that it is managed and carried out in detail with many hundreds of people who are involved in trying to ensure that happens. And at the same time, we have also had a number of meetings with residents who are concerned about it to hear firsthand their concerns, and have tried to take on board any of the points that they have sought to raise. The festival, from small beginnings, has developed a global reputation, which I think benefits Hay not only during the period of the festival, which we've heard about and which amounts to certainly more than £1 million, a direct benefit in terms of employment and expenditure made in the town during that period, but benefits Hay throughout the year by the reputation of the town, which builds on the reputation built by the Hay Book Festival and is of cultural value. So when we looked at, as the festival grew from our first operations, we looked for locations which would be most appropriate, because it started off at the Globe, which is right in the middle of the town, literally right next to residents. And we first of all moved across to the other side of the river, but it was facing the town. And then we found the current site, which is undoubtedly the best possible site in the Hay area. It has no residential buildings directly bounding the festival at all. It has an industrial buildings along one side and a supermarket, also protected by a 5-meter bank, which leads up to them. And on the other side, there is the river. And when we first took the festival on, there was nothing other than woodland on the other side. You've heard from John Farnsworth, who owns that land on the other side. And in the time that the festival has been there, they have put glamping, some glamping options on that site, but they're in small number and they're not residents. And we do everything we can, I really do mean everything we can, to ensure that the festival runs smoothly, that there is no disruption to people. And when you've heard about the hotline, when we actually investigate the specific complaints there were during the festival itself, we were unable to find any that were verified. It remains the case that we will continue to listen to all representations and seek to improve the operation of the festival, as we've done from the outset. But it is central to the festival that we have this mix of philosophy and music. It's been like that from the outset. It is the identity of the festival. And I don't think that we can change that underlying structure of the festival and being able to keep it in any of its current form at all. I don't think I have anything further more to say to that, but thank you for hearing my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank everybody who's spoken, including all the residents who've come to express their anxieties. And I'm now going to ask members of the committee if they've got any questions they would like to ask. Mr. McGregor, did you?
So I just wanted to check that I have an opportunity at the end to summarise my client's application after questions have been asked.
Right. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all attending and representations from the agent, the applicant, and all the...
Everybody.
Yes, exactly. I just had a couple of questions I wanted to clarify. In terms of the hours of operation, I note the site closes at 5 p.m. on Monday, I know the alcohol licence runs till 4:40. Well, the application for the licence hours runs to 4:45 on the Monday, and the music is specified as finishing at 5 p.m. on the Monday. I have concerns with regard to alcohol and music ending very close to when the site licence opening hours are concluded. Could you clarify to me, as the agent or the applicant, your plan for exiting the site whilst almost still serving alcohol and music still playing? Thank you.
Councillor Simmons, I will deal with the sort of the more legalistic point, and then my clients will deal with the operational side of that. The first point to make is that the hours that are being applied for are the same hours that were applied for last year. The sale of alcohol will finish 15 minutes before the site closes, so it allows people a period of time to drink up, as you would get in any licensed premise, and then any music will stop absolutely at the music. The times for regulated entertainment run in line with the closing time of the festival on the Monday, but the festival on the Monday is actually when it's winding down. But there is a 15-minute period to enable people to drink up if they are if they've bought a drink at quarter to 5 on the Monday. In terms of the dispersal from the site on the Monday, that's perhaps something that Mandy or Hilary could pick up, and also Mr. Hanks.
Which one of you would like to pick it up? Mr. Lawson?
Shall I just make an overall comment, which is that we arranged the programme, as Ewan has pointed out, so that we wind down gently, so you don't get a lot of people leaving at once. So the number of events decreases as that afternoon goes on. So by the time we come to 5 o'clock, there are a relatively small number of people on the site, and there is we've never had a problem with people leaving at the end of the festival. I don't know whether either of the others would like to comment. Maybe Mandy or Mr. Hanks.
Well, I'm happy to comment on that. I mean, the last event that takes place on the Monday is the Glenavon Male Voice Choir. And as Hilary says, that's one venue that's left open. We see an exodus of people once the debates stop, and we've never had a problem with clearing people from the site, and they leave. So they leave in quite an orderly and quick manner. As all my experience of all the festivals would back this up.
Thank you, Ms. Houghton. Thank you, Mr. Lawson. That's given me some context. Could I just ask a further question, Chair? With regard to the change from applying for an annual licence to a 5-year licence, could you explain your rationale to me? I understand, Mr. McGregor, completely. The other licensed festival venues apply for longer term licences. I would just like to understand what is your precise rationale for changing this approach. Thank you.
Yes, so my clients have secured this site for 5 years. And so that's the underlying rationale for applying for a 5-year license.
Thank you.
It doesn't mean to say, of course, the point I made earlier is that there is no recourse, or that we won't be held to account, or that there is no public scrutiny. There is ongoing scrutiny before, during, and after every single festival.
Does appear to be a real source of contention with many of the local residents, the 5-year request.
I understand that, and I think that the concern that has been raised, and the sense I got from having read all of the representations, is that it would stop the local residents from, I think one of the phrases is that there would be no recourse, or that they would not be able to hold my clients to account, or that there would be no public scrutiny. That is simply not how the process works. the festival takes place, there is a safety advisory group debrief, and at that meeting are all the blue lights, the environmental health officer, traffic, police, public health, and they will consult in turn with the local community as is appropriate, and they will make recommendations to further amend the safety management plan, the noise management plan, all the other plans that sit beneath the conditions or underpin the license. We are also happy to, when I say we, my clients are happy also to have a debrief with the parish council, if that is their wish. And if there are other, and I'm saying this without instruction, but given the way that my clients have engaged widely with the local community in the past, then I'm sure that they will want to continue to do that as widely as they can, and as widely as the local community wish. If there is non-compliance or there is non-cooperation in all of those safety advisory group meetings and in the meetings that we have with the local community, and there is evidence to support a license review, then anybody can review the premises license and bring it back before before you as a licensing committee. And so there is
Thank you, Mr. McGregor.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think as a licensing committee, we're aware of what the options are for recourse to license review. So thank you for explaining that to us again. I do have some concerns about the change to a 5-year licence, particularly as we have had an additional request from the environmental health officer for an additional mitigation for the point 9, the premises licence holder or DPS must immediately comply with any request to adjust noise levels. That's clearly something that has been concern to enable that to be requested and accepted by yourselves within the application. I therefore have a little bit of concern about the amount of time that you're applying for without this coming before this committee again. I appreciate what you're saying with the licence review. That doesn't come before us, and it doesn't give us the check and balance and real public scrutiny at this stage. So I think we'll take on board absolutely what you've said, and we'll have a discussion with our legal advisor as well, and the licensing technical officer, Emma. But thank you very much for your very clear comments.
And thank you all. Mr. McGregor, did I understand you to say, do you include routinely the parish council in your discussions?
We attended a meeting with the parish council. I think it was in March. Mandy Houghton attended the meeting. But when the residents hotline letter is sent out to the 100 local residents and businesses, I think I'm right in saying, and I will be corrected by Mandy if I've got this wrong, is that a copy of that is delivered to the Cusalt Parish Council.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
I always recommend good consultation with the parish councils is always very, very advisable.
Yes.
Can I also say that we also send a letter to Hay Council as well?
Thank you. Are there any more questions? No? Right, we will now adjourn. It's now nearly 11:20. If we come back and say, pardon? Oh, Mr. McGregor wanted to sum up. Sorry, didn't you? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yes, sorry, I do apologise. I don't want to take. I appreciate I have spoken a lot, but it is a matter of significance and importance to my clients. One of the councillors, and I apologise because your name has gone as quickly as it appeared on the screen about the additional condition that the environmental health officer had asked for. the operating schedule conditions set out 8 conditions insofar as noise is concerned on top of the noise management plan. And the additional condition that the officer had requested, you've read out. It was agreed as quickly as it was offered, and in any event, we would have complied with it even if it had not been on the license. Can I just very quickly just make a small number of points if I can find my notes? Just bear with me for 2 seconds. What you're left with are 100 residents were consulted directly before this application, and that's before you consider the wider statutory consultation. There are 9 representations from local residents, 2 from the same household, and as Hilary said, many who raise the same issues, and many which fall outside your remit. But where relevant, plans have been adapted. 15 local residents are in support, and the silent majority are unworried by this application. There were 5 calls throughout the totality of last year's festival to the noise hotline, and when checked, the noise levels were within the agreed parameters. There are no representations from any of the responsible authorities, and as a consequence of that, you're entitled to infer that they are also unworried. There is significant scrutiny, and if any of the responsible authorities had any concern that the application would not promote the licensing objectives, they would have made a representation. They have not, and we say that combined with the perspective brought to bear by the local residents who support the application, that is of significance. I'm not going to repeat all that which I've said already. I just want to highlight 4 very quick bullet points in relation to the national guidance, and that's contained at page 198 of the supplementary bundle. Paragraph 2.1, the police are a main source of advice in relation to crime and disorder. Paragraph 2.21, the responsible authorities are to consider what constitutes a public nuisance and to recommend appropriate conditions as attached to the licence. All conditions in relation to public nuisance have been agreed. Paragraph 9.21, each responsible authority is an expert in their field and should be the council's main source of advice in relation to the licensing objectives. Paragraph 9.44, you are entitled to consider the potential financial burden any additional condition will have due to the restrictions on any licensable activities. And paragraph 10.10, the committee should be alive to the indirect costs, that can arise as a result of any additional conditions. And I'm just going to finish with this point, is that licensing is all about proportionality. We, and no operator, are able to eradicate every last possible risk. And candidly, if we were to do that, then you as a committee would never grant any license. We would close all licensed premises just as we would close all motorways. But what we can say is that my client, is adopting a proportionate and reasonable approach to this application. That will continue to involve full engagement with the council, the safety advisory group, the QSOP Parish Council, with a further residents engagement letter providing details of the residents hotline. My client, and as Mr. Lawson made abundantly clear when he spoke, are sensitive to the concerns of the local residents, but we invite the committee to conclude that, absent any concerns from the responsible authorities and absent any regulatory enforcement action having been taken in relation to the festival over the many years that it has operated, that a fair, proportionate and balanced means of protecting those concerns and promoting the licensing objectives has been proposed, and that the application should be granted as requested. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Right, we will now adjourn the meeting for the committee to discuss their point. If you'd all like to, what is it now, about 25 past 11, if you'd all like to come back at 12:15, is that 12:15? Right. Thank you all for thank you all for coming back. I'm sorry about the delay, but as you can imagine, we've given this a lot of thought. The subcommittee's decision is eventually to approve the application as applied for. Our reasons. The subcommittee has taken into account the detailed representations and the information presented to the hearing and fully recognises the concerns raised and the reasons why the representations were made. The subcommittee can only consider those representations that relate to one or more of the licensing objectives. And the subcommittee considers that overall the application made is comprehensive and will promote the licensing objectives. The length of the licence applied for has been very carefully considered, and the committee does have concerns as the number of representations has increased over time and that the parish council has also made a representation. The committee would strongly advise that should the premises licence conditions not be complied with, that the residents use the provided hotline and also inform Herefordshire Council Environmental Health and Licensing Department as well as other appropriate responsible authorities so that concerns are properly documented as soon as it's practicable. Should licence conditions be reached, the review process can be utilised. The subcommittee does not have any jurisdiction over Powys County Council and so recommends that neighbouring property within Powys Authority area contacts the Environmental Health Department at Powys County Council to inquire about a noise monitoring station. I would offer appeal information. Under Schedule 5, Paragraph 2 of the Licensing Act 2003, the applicant or a person who has made relevant representations may appeal against the decision. Schedule 5, Paragraph 9 states that such an appeal must be made to the Magistrates' Court within a period of 21 days from the date that the applicant is notified in writing of the decision. Should you wish to appeal this decision, then it is recommended that you obtain your own legal advice or contact the Magistrates' Court at Bath Street, Hereford. Thank you all once again for your attending, and I will now close the meeting at 1:25. Thank you all again.